This is the Hyundai Ioniq, easily one of the most exciting new electric vehicles on the Malaysian market. So exciting, in fact, that we still haven't been able to get one on test from Hyundai Sime Derby. This is a customer car who reached out to us to offer his vehicle for us to review so that we can tell you all about it. My name is Aiman Abdullah, this is Malaysian Motoring, this is our review of the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Now, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 is available in 3 trims, that being Light, Plus and Max. This is the flagship Max model, which you can tell in 2 ways. First, it's got the full LED headlights, proper LED headlights, without the funny looking fogs at the bottom. And it's also got the proper multi-spoke alloy wheels wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sport EV tyres. These are specially designed for this car, not only to handle the weight, but also to handle the performance, which we will get to a little bit later. Now, one of the things that has made the Ioniq 5 so exciting for this market is the way it looks. It looks interesting with these parametric pixel headlights, this light bar that goes all the way across, which I suspect is not really coming through on camera. And overall, the front end of this car makes it incredibly distinctive, and it's very easy to fall for something that looks like this, especially if you're from the 90s era, you grew up with 90s video games and those little dot matrix pixel screens. It looks really cool. The only thing to really break up this design is the very round Hyundai badge, which I guess you couldn't really run away from. Now, before we touch on the side profile of this car, I think standing here will give you an illustration of just how enormous the Ioniq 5 is. It's very easy to mistake this as being a B or C segment hatchback, but what this is actually is more of a D segment crossover. It is huge, which is why you may not notice that these are actually 20-inch alloy wheels. Yes, 20, not 19, not 15, 20. Now, onto the side profile of the car, you will notice that there is quite a lot of grey body cladding around the car, again to emphasize that this is ultimately a crossover, whether you like it or not. You also get flush door handles, a fixture somewhat when it comes to electric vehicles, and they do pop open when the vehicle is unlocked. Now, this of course is to reduce drag, it's not just for show. Now, unlike some other EVs, this car does come with actual door mirrors. Now, while everyone seems to like to talk about cameras for rear view mirrors, these work better. And they're a lot easier for you to get used to them when you're coming in from a conventional vehicle, because the side mirrors are exactly where you expect them to be, on the side of the doors, outside of the window. Now, at the rear of the Ioniq 5, this digital fascination continues with the parametric pixel taillights with a very unique light signature, as well as the full-width LED light bar, which is a bit of a signature for electric cars. You also get the Ioniq 5 badge here. This is the only place the Ioniq badge appears on the exterior of the car. Everything else is just a Hyundai badge, and I find it interesting that it's done up in white, given the fact that most badges are done up in silver, like this Hyundai badge and the H-Track all-wheel drive badge down here. Now, because the Ioniq 5 is quite an enormous crossover, that does mean that it has a good amount of practicality. Now, if I open the boot, you will see that while the boot floor is quite high, mostly to accommodate the Bose subwoofer that lives underneath the boot floor, the amount of space back here is actually quite decent. Yes, it's not very tall, but it is very deep. And of course, if you want to load in more items, you can just remove the parcel shelf, which unfortunately does not stow underneath the boot floor, and fold the rear seats down for even more space. But as you'll quickly realize, there is actually even more space on the inside, which we will get to now. Now, inside the Ioniq 5, I'm perhaps doing this in the most comfortable position I've ever been in because the car is on. So I can actually keep the air conditioning running and the ventilated seats are going as well, so my bum is nice and cool. In any case, the interior of the Ioniq 5 is massive. This is of course aided by the fact that this particular car comes with a light colour interior, which the owner uses despite having 3 children, which proves that you can keep a light colour interior clean. And if you say that you can't, it's just because you're lazy. Now, the inside of the Ioniq 5 is, as I said, very massive, and the design of it helps to emphasize that width. You have these 2 widescreen displays in front of you, which have a rather large white bezel around them, but more importantly, you have a lot of horizontal elements to, again, emphasize width and space, which is very nice. Both the front seats are electrically adjustable, although the steering wheel is not, but finding a comfortable driving position is relatively easy because of the level of adjustment that you get from the wheel and from the seats. In terms of practicality, you have plenty of space. You have a center console which you can move forward and backwards, if I somehow figure out how to do this at some point. Hold the line collar. As I was saying, you can move the center console if you hit a little lever here and use quite a bit of force, and this can actually slide forward and backwards. This allows you to maximize the amount of space in here, especially this flat floor where you can walk through the middle. And of course, there is even more space down here for things because there is no central tunnel, and there is also a large glove box for you to put things. Now, down here in this movable tunnel, you will find the wireless charger, as well as a couple of USB-A ports. Up front, you will find another USB-A port, which is designed specifically to connect with the infotainment system. This makes it very irritating because it means that you have to leave your phone in a box sort of down there, rather than somewhere here where it would be more convenient, because unfortunately the Ioniq 5 does not come with wireless Android Auto. Even more annoyingly, the owner has informed us that this car still does not come with any software updates, which, among other things, means that the Android Auto system in this car, 1, doesn't use the full screen, and 2, is in a laughably low resolution, which makes this otherwise nice interior look a little bit low rent. Now, in terms of build quality, which is something that a lot of people have talked about, this being a Hyundai, build quality is actually pretty good. There is a lot of soft touch materials all the way around the place. All the things that you touch in this car feel high quality and well made. And we do appreciate the fact that there are still plenty of physical buttons here to allow you to access most of your most used functions. The only irritating thing, however, is the fact that in order to get the ventilated seats going, you have to press one button here and then another button here to get it going. And then because it's on the touchscreen, and the touchscreen is a little bit further away, so this is my ideal driving position and I can't reach it. So there is a little bit of faffery to have to get into the settings here. Although that said, once you've set up everything, you don't have to touch it again, do you? Now, as I said earlier, this seat is electrically adjustable, which is important because this car also comes with, if you'll be patient, a relaxation mode. So there is actually a leg rest, both on the passenger and the driver's side, which allows you to put it up, eventually, it's electric seat, and then you can recline the seat to a properly ridiculous angle and rest while your car is charging. Name the number of cars that will allow you to do that. Now, once I put this back into a driving position, which obviously you can't do with the leg rest up for obvious safety reasons, we will move to the rear to talk a little bit more about space. Now, in the back of the Ioniq 5, again, you benefit from the fact that this car is enormous and also electric. For starters, there is absolutely no hump in the floor, which means you can carry 3 abreast back here quite well. You also have a couple of USB ports and another access to storage from that movable center console that I showed you earlier. Now, one of the big benefits of this car is you do get B-pillar mounted aircon vents, which is a lot better than the ones mounted in the middle because that will only really cool your crotch. So at least this is a lot better for rear passengers. However, the owner and I have both noticed that these vents are a little bit weak, which means you actually have to pump up the fan speed from the front quite high before they're of any use. I guess it is quite helpful then that you do get rear sun blinds to help reduce a little bit more of that heat. Now, when you are back here, aside from that, like I said, there is an absolute expanse of legroom, and if you think that there's a bit too much, you can actually adjust these seats 60-40 split to reduce legroom and also improve cargo space. And as you can see, it goes quite a way. It is said though, when you are sat in this position, there isn't really that much space underneath the front seats, so you do need to negotiate foot space a little bit. But that said, if you put the seat back to a reasonable position, you can actually recline this seat. I'll do it from here so you can see it. Now, this seat at its most upright is about here, and at its most reclined, it's about here. So could you imagine doing a long distance journey in something like this where you can just sort of kick back and relax and enjoy the view out the window? Now, other accoutrements include buttons here to adjust the seat position for the rear, not the front seat, weirdly. You also get a rear armrest with a couple of built-in cup holders, not the push to open type. But overall, the space back here is rather nice. The only one problem with this car, which again the owner has pointed out, is the fact that the seat buckles in this car seem to rattle quite a bit. And so he's had to put felt on the pillars, both on the front and on the rear, in order to reduce that rattle. Now, I have a theory that usually noises like this would be covered up by the sound of an engine. But because the Ioniq 5 obviously does not have an engine, these noises become a bit more apparent. You can tell that Hyundai has done a lot to try and reduce noise in this car. So for example, these windows are actually double glazed in order to reduce the amount of noise coming into the cabin. Unfortunately, we are not sure why Hyundai's engineers didn't notice the rattly seatbelt. Now we have to talk about charging. So charging the Ioniq 5 is done through this flap where it will pop up electrically and you have access to both AC and DC chargers. If I just remove this flap. Now, charging times on this car obviously will differ based on the amount of power you have available, AC or DC charging, and even if it's DC charging, your state of charge, the health of the battery, the temperature, and so on. But at its fastest, this car should be able to charge from 10 to 80% in about 40 odd minutes, if I'm not mistaken, if you can find a 250 kilowatt charger, which we do not have in this country. Now, what we do have here is a little party trick from Hyundai and also Kia. This is called a vehicle to load system, where with this little thing which comes as standard, free of charge with the range topping Ioniq Max, you unplug this thing and then you put it into the socket and then you flip this open and you have a 3-pin plug back here. With this in place, and now as you can see the indicator lights over there are blinking, you can flip it on, the little green indicator light here, and you can proceed to use this as an enormous power bank, which means that if you are out here and you want a refreshment, you could boil a pot of coffee. This is one of Hyundai's slightly more interesting ways of positioning this as a lifestyle vehicle, because in theory, you could take your Ioniq 5 off-road camping and use it as a way to charge up your ancillaries to ensure that you have the full comforts of home even when you're far from it. Now, I guess it's enough waffling. It's time to get onto the drive. Now, behind the wheel of the Ioniq 5, it is a bit of a surreal scenario. So far I've personally only driven 2 electric cars as part of my job. Personally, I've driven about a couple of more. But we've driven the Taycan and we've driven the Kona EV in the past, both of which the reviews are available on the channel. And admittedly, even though this is not necessarily a new experience for me, it is still a bit weird, given the fact that there is absolutely zero engine noise. I'm traveling along at about 50 kilometers an hour in what I believe is normal mode, yes, and I must admit that it is surreal. There is no engine noise, there's no vibration through the steering wheel to inform you that there is something turning dinosaurs into motive force. It just goes. And it almost feels like my ears haven't popped or something, because my brain is telling me there needs to be noise. But enough about my unfathomable, or my inability to fathom electric mobility. Let's talk about what it's like to drive this car. Now, as I said earlier, the Ioniq 5 is actually a lot larger than you might initially expect. You may not realize that this is quite as large as it is, but it is. And from behind the wheel, it is immediately noticeable, mostly because the slightly strange shape of the rear view mirrors means that you don't really see a lot of the car. You just see a little bit of the trim around the windows, but you don't see a lot of the car itself. You only realize its size when you're trying to thread it through traffic or park. Now, mercifully, the Ioniq 5 does come with a 360-degree camera, which makes life a lot easier, especially when you're parking. However, those of you thinking that this is the perfect city car, yeah, you might need to rethink that a little bit. And maybe consider an MX-30, which has enough range for that kind of use, although we're not here to argue about that anyway. Ooh, Taycan. Now, from an almost standstill, if I were to floor it, good lord, the immediacy of the torque is odd. Because again, we're used to internal combustion cars where it takes a while for the revs to rise and then eventually you'll reach peak torque and peak power output. Whereas an electric car, it's just... And because of that, it can be a little bit unnerving. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but eventually you will get used to the fact that, okay, I have a lot of potency under my right foot. Once you're used to that, it'll be fine. And it'll be very easy to get used to because this interior lulls you into a sense of serenity, and so you want to drive it as gently as humanly possible, like I am now. Speaking of gently and being lulled into serenity, because this is the flagship Ioniq 5, it means it does come with Hyundai's full suite of active safety features, which includes adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, and basically level 2 semi-autonomy. What that means is this car can drive itself through traffic, which will give you an opportunity to enjoy the coffee that you brewed earlier via the V2L system. Now, talking about traffic jams specifically, we got a question about whether or not electric cars can do traffic jams? The short answer is yes. The long answer is you have to consider what happens with an engine when you're stuck in traffic jams. Now, those of us who are familiar with internal combustion cars know that traffic jams are your biggest enemy when it comes to fuel efficiency, because when your vehicle is driving too slowly, or at a standstill for that matter, the engine is still ticking over. And when that happens, you have a lot of petrol that's being burnt just to keep the engine running, and also the ancillaries like your air conditioning and stuff like that. An electric car is actually the other way around. When you're stuck in traffic and you're traveling at lower speeds, that is actually what helps you to achieve slightly better energy consumption versus higher speed driving, like when you're on the motorway and cruising along. Now, the owner of this car actually informed me that on a 7-hour drive from KL to Penang, to which he's a very brave man, but on a 7-hour drive from KL to Penang, he said that he achieved basically what Hyundai claims this car can do in terms of battery power consumption on a drive because he was stuck in traffic. And when he compared it to a previous experience in Velfire, if I'm not mistaken, he explained that it was so much more serene to do it in this car because not only was it almost completely bereft of sound, but also because of the level 2 semi-autonomy, it meant that he could basically let the car do the majority of the work. This is one of the aspects of electric motoring that I feel that a lot of people will truly benefit from, because they maybe don't realize how much they have to endure when it comes to internal combustion vehicles. When you run an electric car, it becomes quiet, it becomes serene, and you have so much less stress as you're driving along on the motorway. And when you add your level 2 semi-autonomy features, it just makes the experience so much better. Now, talking about long distance, obviously we have to talk about range. So this car has a claimed full battery range of about 475 kilometers, at least that's what it's saying. Oh, we've got brake regen going. So it says that it'll do about 475 kilometers on a full charge, based on what the energy information panel on the car is telling me. Now, 475 kilometers is more than enough for you to do your daily commute, that's for sure, as well as taking a few long distance drives. In fact, again, the owner was informing me that in the 5,000 odd kilometers that he's had this car, he's done a couple of long distance trips in this, and there was no need to stop between KL and Penang, and even Penang back, because the range is sufficient. Now, as I mentioned earlier, your charging experience will differ depending on the kind of charger, the charger's speed, the state of charge of your car, etc., etc. So we're not going to go into that too much. But what's clear is that the Ioniq 5 is packaged in such a way that the majority of buyers can make full use of this car in a proper manner. There won't be too much concern over range anxiety and so on. This differs from the Mazda MX-30, which comes with about 200 kilometers in a full charge. Now, Mazda argues that 200 kilometers is more than enough for you to do your daily commute, and you only have to charge the car maybe once every couple of days or so. But this Ioniq 5 presents itself in such a way that this could be your primary vehicle. Now, from a personal standpoint, I don't believe that an electric car with the infrastructure in Malaysia as it is today, an electric car stands a chance at being your only vehicle. Ultimately, there are going to be certain trips where 475 kilometers is simply not going to be enough for you to get from your point of origin to your point of destination. But in terms of simply reducing the stress on your daily drive to be able to do your daily commute and run errands around town and so on, an electric car would be a perfect fit, especially if you live in a household where you have multiple cars anyway. So, in terms of overall practicality, what it's like to live with and so on, I'm afraid that I'm still not at liberty to really talk about that because I haven't had a car like this to live with on a daily basis. We are working very hard to try and get an electric vehicle on the channel from a distributor so that we can live with it over a longer period and tell you what that might be like. But for the time being, we're very grateful that the owner of this particular Ioniq 5 has given us the opportunity to review this car and to talk about it at great length, and obviously at the expense of his time, in order to provide a little bit more insight as to what it would be like to live with something like this. I still remain steadfast that if you come from a household where you have more than one car, you can afford to change one of them into something electric, because when it comes to the daily grind and so on, there is nothing quite like having an electric car at your disposal, especially with the assurity of waking up every morning and knowing that you've got a full charge for you to take on the day. When it comes to long distance drives and so on, you want to take the family somewhere, get into an internal combustion car, something with a big range and a powerful engine and so on, because you don't need something like that to drive every day. You can get away with an electric car, especially something that is as quiet, as refined and as serene as something like the Ioniq 5. In any case, that has been our very quick review of the Hyundai Ioniq 5. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Very quickly, a big shout out to the owner of this Ioniq 5 who reached out to us and offered his vehicle for review. This is again an opportunity we haven't yet been afforded by a manufacturer, simply because demand for electric cars are so high that they are simply not holding on to any electric cars for their own use because they would rather prioritize giving them out to customers. So we're very grateful to have been given this opportunity, and we look forward to getting more of these opportunities in the future. Thank you so much for watching. We will catch you in the next one.